Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me on this? No? Uh, Brian, do you know if this thing needs it? Yes. So people streaming should be able to hear me. Okay. Hi, I'm Jonathan Miller. I'm Assistant VP for Research Administration, and thank you for coming out today to hear our first candidate for the director of the IRB. We have Nicole Vouvalis, who is currently the director of the IRB at at Utah State University. So I'll now turn it over to Nicole, and she'll give her presentation, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers afterward.
One second while I do the technology adjustment. I'm pretty good at projecting, so if there are folks watching, I'm really sorry if this is too loud for you. Turn me down. I think that's how most folks at my current institution deal with me. So my name is Nicole Vouvalis. I, as Jonathan just mentioned, am the current IRB and HRPP director at Utah State University in Logan, Utah, about an hour north of Salt Lake City. I'm here because I am interested in shifting roles and exploring what your fine institution has to offer. I wanted to spend just a little bit of time doing the About Me piece, but I want you to know that it is specifically because he asked me to, because it's obviously the worst part. And then the talk is focused on my vision for excellence here at UAB, and then plenty of time, as he mentioned, for questions and answers. I just wanted to sort of give you the rundown of how we were going to spend our time together. So the About Me piece, and I imagine that was not intended to be a philosophical thing, so we'll skip right to the sort of how I landed on the IRB track. I don't think you need to know like the city I was born in, my mom's maiden name, or how else to hack my passwords, if you were ever interested in such a thing. So I graduated a semester early from Florida State University College of Law in December of 2010. That's a picture of our nice little rotunda. And I realized that at the end of that, I had a lot of tools and I was engaging in some perspective shifting. So I went there because I wanted to practice criminal law. And then sorry for those of you who've heard this story already, but I sort of came out of law school understanding that that's not what I wanted to do. I also came out of law school with an amazing partner who studies the Supreme Court and state courts of last resort. And so that's how I first got exposed to research. And I've done a little bit of research alongside him and some other colleagues of mine. And I became sort of more enmeshed when I started teaching international law and policy at Coastal Carolina University in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Technically Conway, but most people know Myrtle Beach. So I became really interested in the academic side of the university, and a lot of folks who work with me want to know whether I do research because I'm regulating researchers, and I do enjoy engaging in that. I liked teaching, but I wasn't really ever going to be an academic, and Coastal Carolina University didn't have much of an academic infrastructure, so we went back out on the market together, and I became the Chief Diversity Officer at Utah State University in 2012. That's Utah State University. My office is literally right there. I was engaging in a pretty big perspective shift. I had went to law school. I've taken now, by the time I moved here, my third bar exam and passed my third bar exam. And I was really trying to sort of figure out how I wanted to put this law degree to good use and still engage in the academic world without being an academic. So perspective shift there in terms of how I'd looked out on my career and certainly where I was going to live. I'm from Florida, so living literally a mile high was not something I actually ever planned to do. And yet, there I was. So here I am at Utah State University, and I am living in these mountains, and I'm taking up skiing, which I'm terrible at, or was terrible at. So how did I end up at the IRB?
Baby, get on with it.
Oh, somebody wants me to get on with it. So I will do that. I don't think that they know that I can hear them. I can hear you. Maybe we can mute the participants. Forget it. I'm totally okay with direct feedback, so I will take your advice and I will get on with it. So I moved to the IRB in February 2015 because the IRB chair gave me a call and said, hey, our IRB administrator is retiring. Your background in law combined with your work in the diversity realm, working with sort of underrepresented and underprivileged populations, tracks really well onto what we want to do, right? Which is to protect human participants in research, but also, paying special attention to our most vulnerable of populations. So I moved to the IRB in February of 2015. That same IRB chair was also retiring from the governing board of Bear River Charter School, a position that I took up after her. And so I spend a lot of my free time sort of volunteering my time there. I don't have kids at that school or anything. I just think it's a really neat little school, and I wanted to give back to my community. And earlier this year, with some role shifting in our offices, I became the acting Human Research Protection Program Director. I'm sharing all of this with you because I think it really ties to my vision for IRB excellence. I was perfectly happy in my Chief Diversity Officer role. I really enjoyed the outreach component. I really enjoyed the opportunity to interface with a lot of different folks in a lot of different areas of the state. And so I shifted over here and to the IRB, and a lot of things needed to change. A lot of you that have met with me have already heard that our office was 1.4 FTE when I joined. It now has 6 staff. So I had to sort of go in and, just like my shift from sort of wanting to practice criminal law and moving into the academic arena, I had to sort of shift the way things were done and the way things were working at Utah State University's IRB. And I think that these things all sort of tie into things that you would want to know about me in terms of what kind of IRB director I would be. I was socialized very early in my time interacting with universities into the importance of research to a high quality institution of higher education. I firmly believe that an institution that wants to grow and get better must have a strong research infrastructure, and that's something that I really want to be a part of. And I think that you would learn about me that I'm also flexible. I was a woman with a plan when I went to law school. I was going to be a prosecutor, and then I was a prosecutor, and it was terrible. So I shifted, right? I shifted into something that would make me more happy, that gave me more fulfillment. I'm not saying that being a prosecutor is terrible. It just wasn't right for me. So I was able to shift my perspective on that in the same way that I was able to shift the way the office was working when I joined that office, and the way we did our work and the systems in which we did our work. I learned the importance of sticking it out. I'm not going to lie that when I joined the office in February and in March, they told me I had 15 days to compile our annual report for AHARP. And by the way, your electronic system does no reporting at all. I thought about going back to my old job. I was like, you mean I have to hand count the days between every protocol submission and its disposition in 15 days for the entire last year? Okay, let's do it. But I learned a lot about sort of being flexible and still sticking it out, right? Taking a situation that you're given and making sure that it works well. And that was also true of my experience skiing. I had a couple of concussions, no broken bones, some boots, some slings, but now I really enjoy skiing, and it's something that is a part of my life. And like, skiing itself is fun and fulfilling, it's neat, but I enjoy it so much more because I really had to work for it. And I've really had to work to build the office that I've built at Utah State University. And I'm really proud of it. And I think that that is a lot of where I derive meaning in my work, is shifting things to do it in a way that I think really is the best way we can. Doing things well is important to me. And so I don't understand the point of undertaking an activity if you're not going to do it to the best of your ability. And that's something that I had to sort of really reckon with when I first joined the IRB, because it had so little resources and because there was so little in the way of compliance efforts. Some of you heard earlier the story about how I introduced the concept of HIPAA to a clinic director when I arrived at the USU IRB. And so to me, it was important that I not only did that job the best way that I could, but that I helped that person to do his job, that researcher, to accomplish his research goals the best way that he could and not get slapped with a $50,000 fine for willful violation of PHI use and disclosure. I believe in high quality training to produce high quality work. I took a lot of ski lessons when I was trying to figure that all out because I wanted to learn in the best way that there was to learn. And that's something that I would impart on my staff if I were to become the IRB director here. First of all, I love doing trainings. I love making myself available to people who want to learn about a particular topic that I can help them to understand and frame protocols around. That is something that really excites me. And so the idea of being able to bring that to quite a large staff is also very exciting to me. Right now, I do a lot of trainings and my staff are like, yeah, okay, we get it. I was like, yes, but do you get all of it and every single point and all of the things that you might consider during a protocol review? All of that is very important to me. I want to set my staff up for success, and so it's a place where I plan to invest a lot of my time if I'm successful in obtaining the position. Supporting my colleagues is also important. One of the folks I met with earlier asked me whether I would be happy if I didn't have to wear 7 hats. I'm not sure who that person was, but you know, if I'm not wearing 7 hats in this position, am I still going to be happy and fulfilled? And the answer is yes, but I also do want to say yes to folks who are doing things in other parts, right? So I don't, as I mentioned earlier, I'm on the board of Bear River Charter School. I don't have any children at that school. I never will have any children at that school, but I'm invested in sort of being there and being a source of support for a community resource that had a need. They needed an attorney to guide them through some tricky issues, and we are through those tricky issues, and I'm in my 5th year of serving on that board, and it's incredibly rewarding, and that's how I am with my colleagues as well. I've served on so many search committees, not because I'll be interfacing with that person, but because they like my hiring style and wanted to sort of bring me into that process. And I'm constantly saying yes to those things. If I think that I can add value to your group or your organization, I want to be there to do that. I understand that I would need to manage my time very well in a position like this and that I have a lot of other administrative duties, but I want to be the kind of person that my colleagues can count on for support when they need that. And I think that my current colleagues would tell you that's absolutely what they get in me. And then in terms of starting to get a little more specifically into my vision, I'm a research compliance officer, right? The IRB works in compliance, but I like the IRB. I'm not saying that this is different from other compliance units. I'm just saying I find a lot of value in the IRB because I think that that compliance structure is a means of supporting a worthy end, right? I believe really strongly in creating good science and doing that the best way possible. And I think that we all can have blind spots. I'm going to share one of my blind spots in terms of running our IRB with you a little bit later. And those are the sorts of perspectives and things that I think about. So I don't ever think that a researcher is approaching us with the intent to do bad or do harm. But I think that in our role with the IRB, compliance can be a way to just improve on a project and really help researchers to create the best science that they can create, not getting into the scientific structure of the study, but sometimes we just catch little things, like you've used different acronyms throughout your measures that who else is going to catch that for you? And little pieces like that. So we're engaging in our compliance role, we're checking out all of these things, but ultimately, I think the goal of the IRB is, first of all, to protect human participants in research, but to facilitate good science. And that's really important to me, in addition to effectuating a university mission surrounding research. I'm really invested in a research infrastructure that is always moving forward, and that is one of the reasons I was so intrigued when I was contacted for this position. Moving a little more exclusively into vision. I think it's really important to listen before you look, right? So Jonathan asked me to speak about my vision, and certainly I have ideas and thoughts, but I think the best thing that you can do is listen to folks first. You have to take stock of what you have and what's already going on. It would not be effective for me to come in here and say, I'm going to run this like I ran the USU IRB. That it simply wouldn't work. So one of my favorite shows, and one of the best shows on television, it's not up for debate, is, I promise I'm flexible, but not on this, is The Wire. The Wire is a show that is set in Baltimore in the early 2000s. And it uses the sort of background of Baltimore to tell stories about the importance of journalism. It tells stories about different communities. It tells stories about education. But at its core, The Wire is a show about what happens when institutions and structures that are built for people fail, and how people adapt and change around those structures. And in any IRB, in any institution, I think you're going to see that happening. The IRB is a structure that people are interfacing with to achieve their ends. And their ends are good, right? Just like the ends in The Wire are to educate children and to have a free press and to get drug dealers off the streets and into more noble pursuits. But those systems that are in place to accomplish those goals consistently fail the very people it's supposed to serve. And I think that IRBs can sometimes fall prey to that. And that we can, get too caught up in comma placement rather than making sure that a risk is fully explained in an informed consent document. I think that sometimes those systems, while set up for success, just aren't effectuated in the best possible way. I want to share that little flag with you. I mentioned my blind spot earlier. I came into a homegrown system at Utah State University's IRB, and about a year ago, we put an advisory council into place. So folks who interface with the IRB, or associate deans, assistant vice presidents, but people who aren't sort of enmeshed in the day-to-day. And the first thing we did was train them the same way we would train an IRB member to do the work of the IRB. And then we started listening. And one of the things that I was really struck by is something that was so simple but should have been so obvious to me in this little flag. That means like nothing to me. Because when I came in, that flag was the way that we opened a field for any kind of changes or a response to a comment in the review process. It's just how it was. You clicked that little button and you made it red when it wasn't before. And that is the thing that freed the researcher up to give whatever feedback we were seeking from them. And I thought nothing of that little flag. It's just the button that you push to move the review process along. And in that advisory board meeting, someone told me, every time I see that flag, it's like a slap in the face. Like, you have done wrong. She's like, look at it. You might as well make it a stop sign. You might as well put a frowny face in it. And you might as well just like write "you're wrong" in the text, because that's what I feel like every time I see it. And I was like, we don't even refer to it as like a warning flag or anything in our office. It's the button you hit to open a field. That's how I was trained, and that's how we refer to it. Opening the field. That, to every researcher we interact with, is probably like, no, you've done this wrong. And because I was just trained in this system, I didn't see that. Like I said, I just saw a button you hit to move things along. And that's not how our researchers were experiencing it. And it's not my only blind spot, but it's the one that had a little thing that I could put on a slide that was easy to sort of explain, right? And so for me, like, part of the frustration for those folks is just the systems that they're interfacing with, like in The Wire, right? It's just that system, the very way that they give us information is punishing to them. And so when we adopted our new system, I was to the ire of the people who were developing that protocol management system. It's like, there will be no red. There will be no exclamation points. There will be no squared off corners or tight things of any kind, and it must be neutral. So now we have something that looks a little more like that friendly little like information point when you're traveling, the tourist information, the orange with the like flowy little eye, because really, we're just requesting more information from folks. And we focused group that out in terms of just putting that out to the research community and listening to them, and they loved it. And maybe it was just because they'd been battered for so many years by this awful little symbol, which is pixelated because that's the way it actually looks in the system, right? It's not just because I blew it up. That's the way they see it. So even just replacing that horrid little symbol makes people so much more willing to engage with the systems that you have set up for them to succeed. So I share that just as an example of my willingness to listen to people, because I know that I have blind spots in the work that I do. I know that there are things that really bother people or that just aren't right, and it takes someone being given an opportunity to say something about it before I can do anything about it. So were I to lead the IRB here at UAB, I would be constantly on the lookout and listening for all of those little red triangle flags with the exclamation points in them. So the first step, before I can articulate a very strong vision, I need to hear what people who are interfacing with this system have to say. So I think some opportunities that are specific that I've identified, I don't want to come in here and make you think that I haven't looked into your structure already. I have. I've spent a lot of time with your website. Is certainly updates to SOPs and policies, which are going to need to take place in terms of the revisions to the common rule that are coming down the pipeline. And USUs will need to be as well, right? It's an opportunity to listen. It's an opportunity to, before articulating a vision, have people come to the table and tell us what they're experiencing as a result of interfacing with those things. I saw a lot of forms referenced in the SOPs, and I think those are great, and I've already talked a lot with a lot of folks today about sort of maybe integrating those a little bit more into the system and making that a little more user-friendly. But certainly sort of systems and processes change, I think, is something that I am really excited about and something that it sounds like you all are interested in this position. And I wouldn't want to do that without creating forums for people to share their input. I think that that's critically important. I use a lot of focus groups and task forces. I have never written a revision to our SOP without engaging in some kind of focus group or task force on that. That's made up of people not on the IRB. And then after the fact, I make sure to run it by our IRB members, and I run it by our Director of Research Integrity and Compliance. But I think that where you can teach folks the structure you have to follow, the best policy can sometimes be created out of the people who have to interface with it. Creating regulatory structures that simply don't work for people is going to lead to not exactly the kinds of failures from the wire. Those were often considerably more dire. But the whole idea of creating systems and infrastructures that aren't working for people is something that I'm really sensitive to. And then in terms of my vision for moving things forward, consulting the experts. I think you can be at the forefront of research without completely reinventing the wheel. I'm hearing a lot of that in terms of the folks I'm meeting with today about the electronic system and reliance agreements or single IRB requirements. And it sounds to me like there's not a lot of reinventing the wheel that needs to be done, but certainly utilizing those processes that a lot of people have spent a lot of time and energy putting into place, I think can be successful. Maybe you need to do some tweaking like we're trying to do right now with our system, make it work a little more seamlessly with Smart IRB with a little bit of programming support, so people don't have to upload an entire protocol again when they've just created the protocol, for example. So those are things that you can do to be at the forefront, right? There aren't a lot of institutions that are interacting with Smart IRB in that way, and I think it's a pretty low effort way to streamline things for our researchers and make them a little more willing to engage in our systems and processes. So the listen before you look, develop a vision, and then speak before you do. I've probably hammered this home with every group I've met with today, but communication is so critical in this position. And I have a lot of ways that I would be interested in doing that here. I have a lot of ways that I'm doing it now. We have a listserv with at least monthly distributions, and that never existed before. We target those distributions, so they're not just going out to every researcher. We have sort of different audiences articulated so that you really are only receiving content that's relevant to you as a researcher. And we're also sharing on that opportunities for focus groups. So something I'm thinking about changing, something I'm thinking about shifting. If anyone wants to come and have some input on that, here's the time and date that we're going to do that. Please come meet. I'll feed you. I feed more faculty than anyone on campus, I'm pretty sure. We do it in IRB meetings too, and I think it's the only reason our IRB members show up, because unfortunately we don't pay them. So we also provide those monthly training opportunities. which is great and something that we should be doing. But I think that the most important thing to come out of those, and something I would want to carry over here, is the opportunity for the one-on-one interactions with the IRB staff and the folks who are attending the training that follow. The training is great and it's valuable content, but that one-on-one opportunity can be so rare for folks who feel like they're just interfacing with a form or interfacing with a system. And so maximizing opportunities for that while meeting other goals of yours, like doing some training, I think is a great opportunity to capitalize on their time and the IRB staff's time. We also use our IRB members. So we aren't usually the ones who put on our trainings. And I think that has made a huge difference in terms of our attendance. We used to, and then we stopped, and we asked our members of the IRB to start helping us to put on trainings. You identify the topic. You're in your department meetings, not me. What do people in your department need to know about? What are some of their concerns? What are some of their complaints? Let's develop a training together. You're going to help me advertise it with the help of your department. Folks are going to come, and they're going to hopefully have their protocol thought out, maybe worked out in the system a bit, and then we're there. We're there. It's a great one-on-one setting to sort of work through some issues or questions in terms of reviewing your protocol. So the communication sort of honestly attack, right? Emails, being in department meetings, having those one-on-one trainings, or having those trainings where you can go to that one-on-one setting. And then something else that I really enjoy, and I didn't realize how effective it was until honestly we started getting feedback about it, was we have a work study student. So work study costs us like next to nothing, right? And he manages our social media. So we have a Twitter and we have an Instagram and we had a Facebook. We got rid of the Facebook, but because comments, no. You can do it on Twitter too. And so that work study student is sort of doing that thing that he's really good at, right? He's a young kid and he wants a Snapchat, but I can't monitor that. So we'll have that discussion later. But people are engaging with that in unexpected ways. Some of them are even cracking jokes with us. We had somebody joke about like taking a run with it and doing an N of 1 study and then tagged us in it like, haha, do I need IRB approval for this? And it took 5 minutes to craft like a fake funny approval letter and tweet it back at him. And that went a long way to building relations with that researcher and that department. And it's just another way of communicating that like we are all people here after the same goal. And so it takes a lot of time, I think, and effort to communicate in a lot of those ways, but it's something I'd be really passionate about and certainly something that I think can be managed with relatively few monetary and man-hour resources. And then within the office, in terms of communication, something I've adopted that I really enjoy is Slack, and we have different channels for different work, right? So amendments, first person to pick up an amendment in the queue because our system was not friendly in terms of assigning things to particular staff. You know, you're claiming that in the Slack channel, but also you're asking questions of something that you're not sure about in that Slack channel. And it's an opportunity, like I said a few times today, to create basically a living wiki. Anytime someone's run across an issue on a protocol review or an amendment review or a continuation review, we're using Slack to talk to each other. And you're creating that body of knowledge, which can then help with consistency, which I know is something researchers just, hate, right? If you've done something once and it was approved, why can't I do it this time this way? Well, I think part of that is just because the institutional memory isn't there from staff member to staff member to staff member. And in using communication tools like this one, it can be. It's easily searchable and it's fun to use. I was telling, I think, some of the IRB staff earlier today that we take like 60-second game breaks. There are games that last 60 seconds each. And then it also re-engages you with the platform, right? So if you haven't used it in a couple of hours, now you're checking it to see what you've missed and to read up on the work that other folks in the office have been doing and to answer questions that maybe you have an answer to that haven't been answered yet. So I find that that is a great workplace communication tool. And it also sort of, you don't have to walk up to my face as the IRB director and say, I really think that that was a poor decision, right? But it allows for a little more communication among the staff. Like, oh, hey, so why did we do this thing this way? It's a little easier to do in that setting. It's kind of like the perils of the internet, but hopefully made good and for productive use in terms of an office environment. And it also allows us to share resources. So when we find something cool, like the Amazon Mechanical Turk Bill of Rights that the Turk workers came up with on their own, right? Somebody can just post that link and it's there. And, oh, we don't like Mechanical Turk? Okay. And so, when you happen across that cool resource, you don't have to have it in your back pocket until staff meeting, or, just share it with the few people who you happen to be around in that moment. You can share it with everybody, and it's there, and it's always there to refer back to. And so I really like the idea of this sort of continuous knowledge, which ultimately helps with IRB consistency, which is another part of my overall vision for IRB excellence. No matter where you are, I think an IRB that makes consistent, strong decisions is a good IRB to interface with. So that's it in terms of the vision and the structured presentation. And I think that folks who are streaming can type some questions in, and you can check on that. Perfect. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Yes. I do not know that particular book. Okay.
Institutional review boards leave a body count larger than that of Vietnam.
I'm currently watching the Vietnam War by Ken Burns. So I'm currently watching the Vietnam War by Ken Burns, and I might take issue with that. I do not.
Constitutional lawyer, law board, stuff like that. It's about things you guess, save for that statement, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
Sort of recap the question.
Oh, great. So the gentleman in the back shared a quote that said the institutional review boards are leaving a body count larger than the Vietnam War. And he asked me if I was familiar with that book or that author, and I indicated that I was not. Well, that was the first thing you asked. The second thing was what I think about the statement. I think that I'm a big believer in data, and that might be a little difficult to quantify, but I'm certainly interested in, I understand the sentiment, right, which is that IRBs are slow and they are blocking good science, and
Book review that I spotted this thing in, the statement was made, the example was brought up, faculty member who was stopped by the IRB publishing some data he already had. I don't recall the details. Hamburger surely does. I don't need to know the details, but I can tell you that everything is going on right here, right now.
One of the things that I really value about institutional review boards is that denials are made by a committee of researchers' peers. So you're not seeing that happen by some rogue staff member sitting in an office somewhere. When a protocol is denied, well, I will not ask you to do that. But I would encourage you to speak with your administrative leadership about that. But denials, from what I understand about the way IRBs operate, is they happen at the committee level, right? So a peer group of researchers are saying whether or not something could go forward. And I think that there's value in that process. And do all committees get it right all of the time? Probably not.
Misunderstand the situation. The situation was an experiment had already been done.
No, I don't misunderstand the situation.
The problem here was the thing about it was just ginned up as a new rule, which you have to send a new one years, was students that had done it gone someplace else. But they had to be on this new thing, which you have to have in place to publish that which you have already done. There's no more human use.
Well, so an IRB only has jurisdiction over that which is a human subject, which is a living person with whom you're interacting with, or their private identifiable information. I would love to visit with you about this afterward. I'm happy to.
As a potential leader for the IRB, how will you balance your time between the administrative duties that you have and the managerial duties that you are will have with your staff?
Sure, better than I am now, because as I've pointed out to some of you in my meetings, I'm also a working director, which means I'm still reviewing protocols. I'm still, and I probably would be here, a voting member of the convened IRB when we meet. And in addition to that, I am now also the director of our Human Research Protection Program, which used to be duties that were separated out, but now are all condensed into the Institutional Review Board office. I'm managing it. It's a lot. And I'm looking forward to sort of removing, not altogether, because I don't ever want to be out of touch with the work that's being done, but taking as a primary task off of my plate the protocol reviews and filling in that support of both staff and researchers. And so in terms of my time management, I would take that piece out that I'm currently spending so much of my time on and split that between my staff and supporting researchers. And then I think the administrative piece of that is probably not much more than I'm engaged with now, especially given our pretty small research infrastructure. So many of our directors are wearing so many hats. And I think that given my balance now, I can condense pretty easily. And I engage in a lot of service to the university now that I might not.
Thank you for a very nice talk, very transparent thing. And as you can see, we don't have any problems with IRB.
I don't think any IRBs ever have problems.
One of the things I'm interested in is how you balance the issue between being risk averse and enabling and being appropriately regulatory.
Sure.
So walking that space, and actually, which is what we're really talking about, is keeping us, most of us, out of jail, and then actually not being a barrier for us and making it difficult for us, for example, to enable clinical trials. Or
yeah. So the core of the question for those of you streaming is about sort of proper assessment of risk. Right, where we're doing the job that we are asked to do, the protection of human subjects in research, without being unnecessarily obstructionist. Fair categorization. I spent a lot of time thinking about this when I first joined the IRB. I had to do a number of risk assessments for an overall grant that I was a part of prior to joining the IRB, and I think it's really easy to create yourself a list of risks, right? And to look at that list and say, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. But you have to think about that in terms of also the probability of it occurring, which I think is something that not a lot of staff are trained to do well. So it's not just what is the risk, but also what is the probability that risk will occur. So what is the magnitude and what is the probability? And that's something that I've spent a lot of time talking to my staff about, right? So FERPA is an important thing to comply with, right? And when you're doing educational research, and you've got to sort of, that's an example where you can't really vary, right? You're breaking the law if you access an identifiable educational record from a student. But there are lots of other areas in education where you can have a little bit of flexibility. And so that's where you have to work in the magnitude of the risk as well as its probability. What ultimately is the probability that a student is going to care if you pull their coursework in the class? It turns out it's pretty low, because we had some researchers that were doing it. And we had to put a stop to it because it's one of those black and white things, right? But we rely very heavily on our IRB members to help us out with the probability piece. We can assess the magnitude on our own pretty well. But the probability piece, I think, is something that we really need to lean on our scientific experts for. It's not something, I mean, if we all had the proper training to judge that, we wouldn't be in an IRB office, we'd be in your role. So leaning very heavily on those members with that expertise to give us a real assessment of the situation. It's not just the list of risks versus the list of benefits, but it's also what is the probability that any of those risks are going to take place versus the benefits.
We have some questions
Great.
from the online viewers. Perhaps we could alternate between online and the live audience.
Yeah. So I will just take them in the order in which they've come. So please speak to the transitions to electronic submissions and the different generations of researchers. For example, some researchers and support staff have different levels of confidence with electronic platforms. Oh, that is such a great question. I came into an electronic system and no one, not even our researchers that had been there for the longest time, wanted to stay on paper. So I admit that that's something that I haven't had a ton of experience with. But oh, sorry, I was reading down and that I didn't address something. I am a big believer in 2 platforms of training. So the first is in person, where you show somebody how it works. And then the second is online videos, where you can, basically they can do it with you, right? So short 3-minute or less videos that show you how to do each and every task in the system that a researcher could possibly want to know. Because I think that that is an incredibly difficult thing to like mess up, right? So even somebody who doesn't have a lot of confidence in an electronic system can go, view, pause, do. Go, view, pause, do. And we've gotten so much positive feedback, especially that they are so short, right? They are very task specific. We're not going to walk you through an entire protocol, but if you get to a point where you're stuck, I mean, we can if you watch all the videos in succession, but if you get to a point where you're stuck, you can easily find that training video. You can access it anytime, whether there are IRB staff in the office or not, and you can walk yourself through that process. Also, as I mentioned earlier, like the opportunity for one-on-one interactions. And so literally 2 days ago, I spent half an hour on the phone trying to help someone recover their Citi login and password for Citi training. And that is something that a researcher can do on their own and should, because we don't actually own the Citi interface. But she was not going to do it on her own, and it needed to get done. So, and my staff assistant was sick. So there I was on the phone for half an hour because the Citi password reset button wasn't working. And so there are times, I think, when you can spend that time and certainly walk someone through that process, but it should be the exception, not the norm, because you should be creating a really good infrastructure for helping people self-efficacy and allowing them to do that on their own. We were going to alternate, so that was online. Did you? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Robin. And so I do a lot of community-based work, community-engaged research, so partnering with the community and developing the protocol and implementing it and evaluating it. And I'll have to say, I've had wonderful working relationships with the IRB. Carrie Oliver has always been so great to really help walk me through the process. She's been just amazing, we'll say, okay, let's think through this, and instead of having to wait to get the red button and saying, and so I appreciate Marty Lawson, Becky Dunn, a lot of great interactions, and there are some tricky kind of things to think through when you do it community-based work, and wanting to do that from the start. So I don't know if you've had any experience with that, or how you can help bring shed some light on that.
Sure.
Vision for that and how to incorporate that in the other experiences.
Yeah. So I do have so the question was whether I had experience and had a vision for community-based research where they are your collaborators as well as helping to sort of gather your subject pool. And so I do have a lot of experience with that. We have a strong school of social work where I am, and I think they never undertake a project without a community-based partner, which I think is wonderful. And there are some tricky issues there, right? So who is an investigator? And so who needs training? And can you realistically expect all those folks to go through that training and still help you to engage with your process, which ultimately is looking to involve the people you're serving because you want to serve them well and do research to see what serves them well. So yes, I'm well attuned to a lot of the issues that go into that, and it does involve a lot of gray areas. But I think it's wonderful, and one example that I have of a situation that we've worked out that is really quite nice, because we are out in the West, we do a lot of work with Native American populations, and so we've built really strong relationships with a lot of the communities that we see being accessed and partnered with a lot, so that we can make sure that they're involved in our review structures and really telling us what's realistic for them and what isn't, which is different, I think, than the community member, the unaffiliated member that serves on the IRB. I think that that's a necessary role, but it's not really what we're looking to that person for. we want to work with our community members to see what is realistic for you. So I spend a lot of time on the phone with community-based organizations saying, okay, here's the general rule. How do we make that work for your folks? And that's something that I'd certainly be invested in continuing. Okay.
I think I'll put the arrow where we are.
Perfect. How would you engage faculty and staff researchers to improve the processes in IRB submission platform?
Can you read it out loud
Yes.
so that everyone hears it?
Yes. Oh yeah, it is tiny for you, sorry. So how would you engage faculty and staff researchers to improve the processes in the IRB submission platform? I would work a lot with the IRB staff to do that. We talked a lot today about the system and the ways in which it is working and the ways in which it is not. I am not familiar, I will say, I'm not familiar with this system. I have not been in it. And so I don't know how that's currently functioning for you. But in the same way that when we were helping Kowali to build out their human subjects modules that we adopted, we involved faculty in every step of that process. We focus grouped every page of that protocol because we had needs and we wanted to make sure that the language that we were communicating would help the faculty to address those needs, right? We don't want them guessing at our language, guessing at our processes, guessing at our systems. And then another thing that we did was essentially we had Kowali homework assignments. So my staff needed to become expert in the system before we could roll it out to anyone else. And I think enabling the staff to also become the trainers is something that is critically important. And so those are some ways that I would certainly engage the staff. And obviously the staff would had a huge role in forming our system as well. But in terms of the faculty, I think I need to do a lot of listening about what is working and what is not working in the current system. What I've heard so far today is that researchers interfacing with the system aren't experiencing anything outside of the ordinary, that it's working pretty well for them. Certainly there are improvements that could be made. And that's something that I'm invested in working on. But that there is opportunities to make that better for them. But on the back end, it's not sort of working incredibly well to meet the needs of the staff. And I think that there are so many opportunities, based on what little people have shared with me today, I think there are so many opportunities for improvement there. But without getting into the system and knowing the nitty gritty, I'd be hesitant to speak to any specifics on that. Yes?
So going back a couple of slides, you talked about engaging and motivating your staff through a reward system. Can you talk a little bit about that, how it works, and what you do to reward them?
Yeah, right now, so one of the main things that they love is this, like, oh, sorry, thank you for the reminder. Yeah, the question was about sort of rewarding staff and motivating staff and sort of helping them to feel like, you know, they really want to be doing the work that we're doing. One of the things I have right now is this like stupid little stuffed animal that someone actually brought to our office, but it became sort of our mascot. And so folks that are doing the highest number of reviews over the course of the last week get to take the mascot for the next week until our next staff meeting. And it sounds so silly, but because we've built like such an emotional connection with this little stuffed animal, it has a lot of meaning for our staff. And even though it's a joke, right? And we like throw it at each other sometimes, and sometimes we put, you know, silly sunglasses on it or whatever, it's become a part of our office. And so building a culture where people get to sort of have fun and feel rewarded is nice and important. And it can be done with something as silly as a little stuffed animal, or as much as like I care about when my staff's birthdays are, and you know, take them out to lunch. Well, right now I take the whole office out to lunch, but again, reminder, we're only 6, so maybe you'd have to limit just. You know, I don't forget things like that, and it helps to build morale. We also, another sort of thing that sounds kind of silly, but is really quite fun for everybody. You know those little Bitmojis, those like little, you can build like a little cartoon character of yourself? So those integrate into Slack, and you can like tell it to queue up a particular like emotion or thing, and it just really helps people to feel like a part of the group. And so that's like a little fun thing that we do to build camaraderie. And in terms of rewards, I give very direct feedback to my staff. So when something has gone wrong, they get that feedback right away, and they get an opportunity to correct it. And I also reward that behavior when it occurs, right? So I know that it's difficult to receive tough feedback, and And I try my hardest to make people want to work toward that corrective piece. By, again, making it a community. I've said in some earlier meetings, like your coworkers are the people that you spend the most time with throughout your week. And it's really important that we all sort of feel like we belong in that office and are a part of a community. And that's something that I'm really invested in, to the point that my vice president has told me to stop spending money on my office. He's like, I see all this stuff that you're doing, and it's really not okay. And I usually get the feedback when a protocol review has gone well that doesn't necessarily go directly to that staff person. I am religious about sharing that, not just with that staff person, but with the whole office, because a rising tide, all of that. So making sure that other, people know that they're appreciated and that their hard work is not going unnoticed is something that I'm very sensitive to. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're welcome. I thought so too, but I think it's just a repeated.
Okay. Someone else?
So one of the issues that we've been dealing with is, I don't know, backlog of, things in the system or workload of what people have to say. If you credit for credit too, when we submit something and it's urgent, that all of us have a very good position through, but also respecting, not everything that we have to do is urgent. But there's, been cases where it takes 3, 4, 5 weeks to add one person to the protocol or something like that. So how would you go about addressing, efficiency or backlogs or things like that to try to minimize some of those buildups that maybe don't need to happen?
Yeah. I mean, again, taking stock of what's going on, right? So hearing that issues like that are occurring and then seeing sort of what the cause is. I think in my office, probably there's an example of every possible thing that could go wrong that every individual researcher has, but looking at the whole, things are going pretty well. And so seeing where those idiosyncrasies are and where they can be addressed is important. So for example, though, something like that, we recently transitioned away from, we don't do personnel amendments. But they are sort of administrative checks, right? So our staff assistant can process a staffing change on a protocol. And so making it so that any person who can sort of touch something easy like that, where you're looking at the training, you're looking at the background, you're making sure it's appropriate, that's all pretty easy stuff to train any given person on the office on. And then it's just a matter of changing a policy or an SOP to be sure that your processes are matching that need for efficiency. I'm a big proponent of the Flexibility Coalition out of the University of Southern California. And so they have a document that's like opportunities for flexibility. And some of those things are things that are listed on there, right? Like empowering any member of your staff to be able to undertake tasks that really don't need a lot of scientific expertise to be done. And so I'm interested in maximizing those opportunities for sure. And our turnaround staff amendment time is 1 business day where I'm at, so. Yes.
From a user point of view, this last question made me think of this. It's sometimes that we think that you're there and you only have to do our application, right? So actually,
no.
Well, I don't think that way. I think you should do my application. You should do it now. And that's not an unreasonable position if you don't know what the workflow is and you don't know what the expectations are. And I think actually having a transparent running thing, you are currently reviewing 80 proposals. The time average for personal amendment is only 1 day, right? But it's whatever it is, right? Time for a full review is this. Then that kind of transparency starts to make people, we have the same problem in OSP. People don't understand why they can't submit their grant 1 hour before the NIH deadline. But they don't really think through, well, what would you do if you had 150 grants to meet that deadline?
Sure.
And you had to press that button. Right?
Yeah.
So how do you what do you do about that sort of real-time transparency type?
Yeah, so the question was about sort of time frames and being transparent about those time frames to sort of set expectations really before people are in emergency mode. So that's something that in my current role, it is at the very front and the very end of the protocol that you file, what the timeline is for the type of protocol that you're in. And then there's a whole tab of our website dedicated to timelines. If you've submitted a request for determination of non-human subjects research, you will hear back from us within 1 business day. If you've submitted an amendment, it will be taken care of within 10 business days. If you've submitted an exemption, it will be taken care of within 12 business days. You know, things like that. And so we have those timelines very clearly laid out, and it's something that is so simple to do. The systems that people are interfacing with can be designed to give them the information that they need to be successful. And that's a way in which we do that. In terms of the running sort of count, I have begged our programmer to mine our system in a way that that information can be communicated in real time. Like you are, you know, like you go to the deli counter, you are number 4, so that you can check in not just on the overall workload, but specifically where you are. And he has told me to give him $1 million, and those two things have the same likelihood of happening. But it's something that with a more sort of robust infrastructure might be possible, and something I'm definitely interested in doing. And like leveraging we're at an institution of higher education that is teaching these things, right? So leveraging the resources that are out there. Hey, computer science folks who are working in sort of these fields and doing some research, wouldn't you like to know where your protocol is in the queue? Help us to design something so that we can communicate that information to you in real time. And we would love to have that out there. I wish I were a programmer. I think so many of my problems could be solved by just learning Python.
Just ask the Russians, obviously.
This is an interview, and I'm not going to go there.
One of the things that we also run in these complex administrative processes in which multiple people are handling a document or handling an application is that if it's not routine, then it stops at somebody's place, desk, and nobody knows. So then it doesn't proceed, and the next thing we know is somebody saying, what happened to my XYZ, right? So if there is, and I think that happens in a number of circumstances, and that's the thing that makes these big outliers in handling time. Right?
Yeah. So the comment, for those of you streaming, was that sometimes there are sort of novel documents or processes that need to be followed, and because they're so new, they get a little bit stuck and can create a backlog for that particular researcher. And so what to do about that? In my office, those things all flow to me, primarily because I'm interested in them. I like the new different thing that I have to deal with. And so my staff are really good at cranking out protocols. And getting those reviews done and getting those protocols approved. And I'm the one who wants to dig into that new thing and create new processes and communicate about it. So I think utilizing the robust staff of assistant directors that are in the IRB to make sure that that's not happening is a really great strategy. If you're at that level, you should be invested in ways to improve that process and make it better and move it forward. And I think, based on meeting the staff today, I get the sense that that interest would be there. And maybe it's just a matter of pushing it in the correct directions.
We probably have time for one last question, and we have one online here.
Okay. You mentioned the importance of training. How would you manage training in a large institution like UAB? You mentioned videos online, in person, etc. Who would develop these? What are the costs, etc.? Oh, that's so great. They're so cheap. The videos are so cheap to make, so easy to make. We hired a student worker in like a sort of PR affiliated department to help us create those videos with high quality. Most of the sound over is myself or my staff assistant, so that's going to live on that website forevermore, and that's kind of embarrassing, but there it is. And it's super low cost, and it's incredibly effective. And in terms of in-person trainings, I really enjoy going out to faculty meetings, departmental meetings, research unit meetings, all of those things. So I'm invested in the in-person piece, and I would identify some other staff who were interested in doing that as well. But the online piece, you really don't need a lot of resources to do that well, which is one of the most exciting things about creating effective training, I think. It really can be done pretty cheaply and still be meaningful.
Any closing thoughts from you, and then I'll take the mic back.
No, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I have a lot of folks left to meet with, but the people that I've met with today, so far, I've been really impressed by the infrastructure that you have here and the evident commitment to research. And I would be excited to join if it all works out.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for everyone for coming. There is an online evaluation form. We really value your feedback on our candidates. It's on the IRB website under the About tab. There's a whole page dedicated to IRB director candidates, and we'd really appreciate you filling out that online evaluation form and hearing all the great things that you have to say about Nicole. Thank you very much. Have a good day.